explain a little bit about how we got started, because it was out of that loss, right, to have the state of California vote against LGBT people being able to marry the person they love, that prompted us to realize we had a lot to learn about the people who had voted against us. And that is what prompted us to start going door to door in every neighborhood where we got crushed, listening, and then trying out new things to discover what, if anything, would change their minds. And I've been a political organizer my whole professional life. I really started as a boy. I went door to door starting at age 15 in Chillicothe, Ohio. I'm a gay guy. At age 6, I was aware of that, knew I could never talk to anyone about it. You are actually not the first I have disclosed this to. But for a long time, I said nothing. And I grew up in the only Jewish family in Chillicothe, Ohio. So the questions that interested me as a child are the ones that have interested me for the intervening 50 years as well, which is, how do we overcome stereotypical thinking? How do we end prejudice? And how do we proceed in a way where we really are able to help other people be their best selves? Because if we really want to help people change their mind, it's a consensual, bilateral experience. It's not something we're able to do just imposing it on people. So today, in the brief time we have, I'm going to share with you what we've learned that will help make you realize you have even more options, perhaps, than you've recognized, when you need to change the mind of someone above you, where you work, or anyone, or even a voter if you decide to get involved in a political campaign. How do we get more people on our side? And so the agenda today, I just gave you most of the brief introduction, and then I'm going to show a brief video, which is actually at the door, one of our volunteer leaders talking with a voter to show you what it looks like. Because who here would be against persuasion? Nobody. Who would be against listening? Nobody. But it's hard to do. So what I hope is to be really practical and make it easier for you to do the very best listening of which you're capable and the very best persuasion. And so most of our time today is going to be discussing what you notice about that video that you like or hate, or you wonder how in the world you'd be able to do it. And I'll try to help with that. That's what we're up to. So deep canvassing, just so you understand the general idea, we go door to door, talking one-on-one with voters, seeking out people who are likely to disagree with us in some important way. And the big thing we're always trying to figure out is how to make every second of our interaction communicate to the other person unconditional, radical respect for them. And we really work hard on trying to become better listeners. God knows I needed to become a lot better, which means not thinking ahead, right? How many of you have ever thought ahead when you were silent, waiting for the other person to stop talking so you could proceed with what you already knew you wanted to say, right? None of you are confessing to it. It's okay. We can talk privately. So let me tell you about the video you're about to watch. You're going to see Virginia Malacky, who uses the pronouns they and them, talking with a voter in Miami. We were going door to door in neighborhoods that are very, very conservative, that have voted against LGBT people in multiple ballot measures. The Christian Coalition said it was going to go to the ballot with an anti-transgender ballot measure. So we we're trying hard to talk with conservative voters about why we hoped they would want to keep transgender people in the local non-discrimination law, as opposed to kicking them out of it. And so where this conversation picks up, you're only going to see 6 minutes of what was like a 20-minute conversation. Virginia started out just asking this guy who answered the door, right, how did he feel about keeping transgender people inside the non-discrimination law on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is he definitely wanted to remove transgender people from the law, 10, he definitely wanted to keep them in, and in the middle he had mixed feelings. And he said he was 10, but in a very tentative way. And what we had discovered already talking to people door to door is a lot of them didn't even know what the word transgender meant. But they knew who transgender people were once it got explained to them. So he rated himself a 10, and Virginia then showed him a short video on a little, like a phone, and it showed both sides making their strongest arguments. Had a young transgender boy talking, had a concerned conservative mom talking. And after showing the video, that's where this conversation picks up, because Virginia's returning to that rating scale, asking him where he is now. So let's go with the video. Spencer, what did you notice watching that video? What struck you hardest? What interested you the most about what you were seeing? And then, mic runners, please, let's have some feedback.
Coming. She drew parallels between their lives. So she was listening so intently with his story that she was able to draw a parallel with her own story so that they could find similarities and meet in the middle.
Right, right. And why did that strike you as in a big way? Why was that a big deal as you were watching?
Because he hadn't had that experience with someone like her before, and so he needed to have that shared experience to come to that understanding.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's partially true. Here's what I would tell you about it. It's like we have two things that we do in the conversation. One is we tell a vulnerable story about somebody we love, right? And I think you're speaking to that, the power of that. And that is absolutely the second most powerful thing we do. But it is a distant second. If you had a 100-story building, it'd be on the second floor. The thing that really is the most powerful we've discovered in having our work measured by political scientists is we elicit the other person's story, their vulnerable story, about somebody they love. Because you notice that's when he and Virginia together kind of discovered the similarity between their situations. And what we've discovered when we follow up with people 6 months after we've talked to them, they really only remember two things. One, they remember we were nice. Number two, they remember what they said. And if you think about this yourself, when was the last time you changed your mind about something super important? Right? And what helped that happen? I mean, it probably wasn't somebody telling you to change your mind. It's more likely there was a process of discovery where you figured out you wanted to change your mind. So I feel like you're really onto something important, though, because the story exchange, we tell our vulnerable story, they realize we're not there to shame them. or lecture them. So then they trust us enough to tell us their vulnerable story. And maybe this would be what it's like inside one of your entertainment enterprises if you need to manage up and talk to somebody to help them see the importance of some of the work you care about. What else did anybody notice about this, this conversation that Virginia had? Anything you really liked that she did, or anything you didn't like, or you wonder why they did it? Yeah.
Hi. I was just going to say that I really appreciated how it was a conversation with active listening. What I noticed was the gentleman was asking questions, and that ability to ask questions without feeling you're going to be judged, because he said, you're the first person that I'm talking to who identifies as gay, but she didn't take it as a defense, nor did he. It was more of a conversation. And so the emphasis on like being there and being present and saying, I'm going to listen to you and you're going to listen to me, and through this we can build a conversation together. I think that's just the first part of building a bridge.
Yeah. And if you think back to that part of the conversation near the beginning, when he used the word fag, what did you think at that moment was going to happen?
What did I think?
Yeah.
I felt very similar to what I forget her name. What was her name again?
Virginia.
Or their name, sorry. Virginia. What Virginia was saying, I felt very similarly. Where I felt like the gentleman did not say it with malintention, but keeping that in mind and like telling them instead, like when you said this word, like here's an alternative. Like this is what we use instead. And so like instead of pointing out and being like you're wrong, it was more like here's an alternative that you can use, and this is what I prefer to use as well. And like, here's the reason why.
Yeah, because that's really, I would say that where that active listening really began, and maybe the moment where Virginia's listening was most tested, was that moment. Because, right, when I hear the word fag, I don't usually feel like it's my lucky day. and any other campaign would have left. They would never have stayed. And they would have rated him somebody who was definitely irrevocably against us. And what happens is sometimes our first impression is correct to the extent that we realize we're talking with somebody who has some prejudice. He has some prejudice, or did. But that's not all of who they are, and that's not all of who they want to be, and it's not the only way they're capable of relating to people. And so I'd say the thing about listening is we most need to do it when we're most scared that we're now face to face with somebody where something that's going to break our heart is before us. But we probably jump to that negative conclusion faster than we have to some of the time. Other reactions, things people noticed about the video. Yeah, cool.
I particularly noticed when they're going through the bathroom question, just like, how do you feel about, a woman dressing up in a man's clothes? And at first he said he was scared, but I was interested how
Virginia.
How Virginia is like, they talked it out a bit more. It's just like, what makes it scared? And it's just like, well, not scary, but through the conversation, they kind of found as just like the feeling isn't scared, it's discomfort. And that makes it a whole different meaning. It's like, it's not a fear, it's just different. And through having that conversation, talking it out, I guess it kind of revealed something to himself.
Yeah. What what surprised you the most about that exchange?
I guess to me, it was taking the time to have that talk in the first place, go into it. I don't know. I don't think it would come into my mind to go deeper into it. It was just like scared. Oh, he's scared.
Yeah, yeah. So it turns out, right? Uh, uh, I love to talk fast. Maybe it's because I'm Jewish. Maybe because my mom and dad talk fast. Maybe it's just me. But but when we're meeting somebody we don't know who might disagree with us, there's nothing more important than going slowly. And I really push myself to talk a little slower than I normally do because what I'm telling them may really be shocking to them. And if I want them to really hear it, I've got to give them a little bit of a chance to digest it. But also, I don't listen that fast. It's not just them who has trouble listening fast. I have trouble listening fast. And so if I'm trying to understand somebody's emotions, their demeanor, their tone of voice, if everything's moving kind of slowly, I'm more likely to hear with my ears and my eyes, and I'm going to recognize that, oh, I'm not quite sure what the feeling is here. And I think that's what Virginia really modeled, right? Is we don't have to rush. So when we go door to door talking with voters, we spend 15 minutes with them. How many of you have ever volunteered on a political campaign? A few of you. And how many of you have gone door to door? Some, okay, great. My guess is you've had 1 minute and 2 minute conversations most of the time. Most campaigns don't spend the time to go slow. They really have a different idea as to what's going to be possible. I would say what I've experienced in my lifetime, right? I'm 68 years old and I've been doing political work since I was 15. I've seen campaigns spend less and less and less effort on connection and persuasion and dialogue and focus more on one-way communications, telling. Partially, it's just easier to do, right? A TV ad, a digital ad. You know the different kinds of communications you've seen around politics. The interesting thing is those one-way communications don't have a very good track record of getting more people on our side. Those communications feel really good to people who already agree with us. So dialogue is just going to be slower, and it requires us to be slower. Yeah, any other reactions? Yeah, cool.
I noticed one of the first things she asked was, where does that feeling come from? And it almost turned it like immediately into a therapy session of him like unpacking like where I'm from, this is how it is, and my parents would hit me if I was friends with this person, and like then he's kind of realize like he probably never even thought about that before, but he's like unpacking where these feelings might come from.
Well, you're totally right that Virginia was really surprised when he said that. And Virginia's Filipina and a lefty. And there's this hope and wish, maybe that all of us share, that if you're meeting somebody who's a person of color, they have an understanding of oppression that is a very specific kind of understanding that maybe is my understanding. But Virginia, they really didn't know what Gustavo's answer was going to be. They didn't know that it, and yes, because he ends up talking voluntarily about his own experience in a very vulnerable way. So I guess the thing that I think you're pointing to is that in a deep canvassing conversation, whether you're doing it at work with somebody you want to persuade or whether we're doing it with voters, I only know I'm deep canvassing when I'm surprised by the other person. And yet it's a little uncomfortable, right? To enter into a conversation knowing that you don't know what's going to happen, right? If you're a perfectionist, anybody here a perfectionist? I didn't think so. Anybody here have a need for control on occasion? Right? So you may not think, oh, today what I need is a big surprise. But if you really want to persuade somebody to be with us, you've got to enjoy the surprising parts, because the common ground that we find is never, hardly ever, what we necessarily would have expected. Other reactions to any of this?
I got one.
Yeah. Oh, somebody over here.
So this video I thought was a really good example on active listening, right? Always finding common grounds. But I think there is something freeing about talking to a stranger about this, right? There's no report, right? This guy can say words that he might not be able to say in a different setting. So my question for you is, what are some conversation starters, for example, between a boss, and someone who's reporting to them that can make room for these conversations, knowing that there's already a report, right? And you have to kind of show up in this professional setting and, really be, carefully crafting your words. And I'm just thinking back to my freelancing days, right? A lot of times, if you want to have a conversation with the higher ups, you have to schedule it, and then I'm only, able to give you 30 minutes, 2 weeks from now, and all that. So how can you best take advantage and still practice active listening and being surprised, but also be able to, really disagree, if you will?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So some of you may have suggestions to share as answers if you've tried doing something like this before. And my experience in the entertainment industry is zero. So I will do my best, but I don't want to pretend I know more than I do. But here are a few things that strike me. One, you can always just start by being honest. This is going to immediately surprise the other person, right? Because you're going to be very vulnerable. And also, instead of engaging in small talk for 10 of your precious 30 minutes, you're going to immediately get to it. So if I was going to sit down with somebody who I knew, maybe didn't get to talk with on a very frequent basis, somebody powerful, when I would sit down with them, and the closest analog I think of is when I'm lobbying, right, talking to an elected official, I say, I'm so grateful you made time for me today. There's something that's really important to me that's a little scary to talk about with you because we might or might not agree. But I really have high regard for you, and the matter is so important, I wanted to see what would happen when I do tell you about it. And then I would tell him what I'm there to talk about. If it's DEI, I would just say it. But more important then, once you've laid that understanding down for the fact that this meeting is important to you, and you're coming with enormous respect and maybe whatever feelings you do have about being there with this powerful person, the second step really is you either inviting them to respond to an open-ended question, or you telling a story, a vulnerable story about yourself. And I'll just give you an example of an open-ended question. A lot of the work that our team has done in the last 5 years was against Trump. Some of it was nonpartisan because the Leadership Lab, the organization I ran that's part of the Los Angeles LGBT Center, has to be nonpartisan. Some of it I raised partisan money for so that we could be very direct, asking people to vote against Trump. Trump supporters in the room, my apologies. I care about you too. The way we would begin every one of these conversations was, hi, I'm Dave, I'm with the Leadership Lab. We're talking with every registered voter today about this really important election we have coming up. And I just wanna know if President Trump was here with us right now and you had 2 minutes with him, what would you wanna tell him? That's an open-ended question because it invites somebody who loves Donald Trump to give me an earful. And if somebody hates him, they can tell me. Or if they're not sure how they feel, although there aren't very many people like that, they could tell me. So that's what I mean by an open-ended question. And by a story, what I really mean is the same way that Virginia talked about Lourdes, right? Because when we talk about somebody we love, somebody who counts on us and we count on them, that is a surprise. It's just not every day that people are vulnerable right from the get-go. Did that give you a good enough answer to your question? And does anybody in the audience have a better answer or something you'd want to add to, because if you've been through trying something like this, practical advice is always good. And if not, if you have other reactions to the video or other questions or thoughts about any of this, that'd be great. Oh, actually, we don't have time for more questions. All right, if you've got advice for your colleague, please share it with her, female pronoun? Cool. And I'll tell you the other thing that I just want to mention that didn't come up about the video. I don't know if you noticed, Virginia was both very direct and very kind. And sometimes we think those two ideas are in opposition to each other. But the reason I feel like nothing but a video could convey to you what it is we do is the fact that you really can be both. And that's why, even though these are strangers who we're talking with, it's not every day somebody comes by who really wants to listen. And that's why they want to talk with us. It's really very powerful. So that's my name, my cell phone, my email. I worked at the Los Angeles LGBT Center running the Leadership Lab for almost 14 years. And then I left in July 1 to write a book. I'm now writing under deadline every day. Really to try to share the ideas about this in time for the 2024 election. But if any of you realize you have other questions, or if you think you ever want to do this for a political project or in a political campaign, feel free to reach out. I don't know that I would always have the answers, but if you enjoy cultivating this capability, I'm glad to do what I can to help. And the other thing is, there really is a rich literature about deep canvassing because we've been measured in randomized controlled trials. it's not just that these are good ideas that I'm recommending to you off the top of my head. This is what political scientists in the most rigorous measurement way possible have found really seems to be one of the very few ways we're able to change somebody's mind in a lasting way about things as important as prejudice or whether they're going to vote or how they are able to see us as human beings. Thank you.